I've given every team in the National League £1 billion in Football Manager. The easiest way to do this is via the in-game editor, which I've used to give all 24 teams more money than they could possibly ever need. Now I'm going to simulate 50 years in the future to see where all this cash can take them. Clubs will go one of two ways. Either they'll invest their money wisely, building up their facilities and producing their very own wonder kids, or they'll go all out spending massive wages on mediocre players before falling into a big pit of despair in financial fair play. I'm going to set a likes target on this video of 2,500 likes, and if you haven't done so already, make sure you do click that subscribe button as we approach 100,000 subscribers. So we'll start off by going 1 year into the future, and as you can see, Wrexham won the title by 11 points from Solihull Moors, but it's Notts County who snuck into the playoffs on 69 points, who ended up winning the playoffs to get promoted as well. Looking at the transfers, there were some big transfers for the National League, I must say. Dion McGee's moved from Stevenage to Solihull Moors for £140,000. I guarantee Solihull Moors would not be spending that on players without this £1 billion that they've got. You can also see that teams like Scunthorpe, Gateshead, Maidstone and Bromley have all spent big on players, bringing them into the division to try and get promoted. I am very interested in the relegated teams though. Maidenhead, Southend, Boreham Wood and Wealdstone. All of these clubs are going to have tons of money as they get relegated into Vanarama National North and South. I predict they will get straight back up. There are some big wages being spent though. Wrexham got promoted with the biggest salary, as you can see there, £3.42 million being spent by them. If we click into Wrexham, have a look at their squad, sort it by the biggest wage, you can see that Ollie Palmer and Paul Mullen are on some big money, £4,500 per week, which actually might be what they're on in real life because they're on some big contracts at the club. But just scrolling through a few teams, York have got players on over £3,000 per week. I feel like that's not usual for York, so we are starting to see the effect of this £1 billion coming in inflated player wages. Of course, the National League is a really competitive division in real life, and you can keep track of it using the One Football app. In addition to all of their great features, they're now offering their UK customers the ability to watch live football from around the world, including Serie A, La Liga, Liga Portugal and the DFB Pokal. They're even streaming Serie A for free on Saturday nights, and this weekend you can watch Sassuolo take on Bologna on the app. So if you really want to help me and the channel out, you can download the One Football app for absolutely free in the top line of the description just below the like button. We're now going to jump to 2025, so 3 years into this experiment, but I do want to see how Wrexham and Notts County are starting to get on in the Football League. But we'll start off by looking at the National League, where Oldham have just won promotion with Southend in second, which is very significant given that they got relegated in season 1. So had their relegation, got promoted from the Vanarama National South, coming second place, and then have come back up and immediately got themselves promoted once again. In the National League South, they spent £190,000 and this past season spent £600,000 on players. And wow, some of these contracts are huge. There's one guy's on £13,000 in the National League. I mean, that's big for a championship contract. This is the National League we're talking about. How much of their budget have they got rid of so far then? Oh my word, they've spent nearly half of it. They're down to £530 million. How have they spent £500 million almost in just 3 seasons? I believe they have done a little bit of work to their facilities. I think they were a little bit lower than this when we started off the experiment. So some money has been put into the stadium and facilities, but I mean, not £500 million worth. What is interesting though is that relegated teams such as Rochdale here haven't actually dropped down, and Stevenage as well, haven't dropped down further into the National League North and South, and actually some promoted teams who don't have the money, South Shields being one, are actually doing very well. They came in the playoffs this past season and they did not have the money, I don't think. Nope, they didn't. They've got £82,000 in their bank account, so a little bit less than the £500 million that Southend have. Looking up into League 2, Wrexham have been promoted in 3rd place, so they're doing pretty well for themselves. Notts County, though, at the other end of the spectrum, have been relegated, and that's not ideal. I mean, how much money have they got left, Notts County? They have got £537 million. So again, they've spent an awful lot of money to get relegated. I mean, some of their players are on most of their players are on big contracts. Bryce Hosanna moved from Wrexham to Notts County, interestingly. How much did they buy him for? £44,000. Come on, Wrexham, you can hold out for more than that, surely. But York and, Chesterfield, actually, of course, Chesterfield. I always think they're a League 2 team, but they are in the National League. They've got themselves promoted as well as Wrexham. So Wrexham and Chesterfield are doing the very best so far. York mid-table, which is not bad. Oh my word, if they hadn't got promoted though, that would have been mental. £44,000 they're playing Jack Jenkins. who is not a £44,000 per week player. How on earth has he wangled that sort of money? He's not even that good. Look at the average ratings. Well, let's jump to the very end of the decade then and see if any of these clubs have made it to the Premier League just yet, because on paper they could do. So we'll jump into the Premier League, and I cannot see any National League club in there, which is a little bit disappointing given that we've given them so much money. I would have expected a little better than this potentially. But as you can see, the Premier League looking pretty true to real life. Newcastle will do very well, I'm sure, in real life, up to 4th place there in 2030. Middlesbrough, Bournemouth and Norwich getting relegated. Dropping down to the Championship then, Everton are in the playoffs. They got relegated, obviously. They get themselves back up there. But obviously, Wrexham must have been one of the teams in the playoffs as well. They finished ahead of Everton and Southampton, but lost. So Wrexham seem to be the very best team that we can see right now. If we look at their playing team, my word, they have got some players on some ridiculous contracts. £82,000 a week for their highest earners in the Championship. They must be the highest paying club in the Championship, right? If we look at the stats, team detailed, scroll all the way down to the bottom, yeah, they are spending the most amount of money in the Championship. Only just more than Fulham, but it's still a significant amount of money right now. And how have they done? If you look at their history, have they won any sort of competitions? They've won 2 Papa John's trophies, which is good for them. But this was their first season in the Championship and they got to playoffs. Right, interesting. They had quite a few years in League One bouncing around and then got themselves promoted. So maybe we need to hold back our expectations just a little bit. Perhaps it might be another 10 years before someone actually gets to the Premier League. But if we drop down into League One, we can have a look through here and we can see that Chesterfield are in there. Southend have got themselves up there as well. Oldham have got themselves back up there. And Altrincham have just been relegated, but there's 4 teams in League One, which is not bad going. And I presume they're all going to have the biggest salaries as well. If we go down to look at the salaries, Portsmouth, interestingly, have the biggest salary, 8 million. Then Southend, then Oldham, Chesterfield in the top 7, and then Altrincham in 12th place. So they're spending a lot of money. How much money do these clubs have left then? So Southend, edit club details, look at their finances, 470 million. So they kind of have sort of broken even. Because I think last time we looked at them back in season 3, we're now 10 seasons in, they were at 530 million. So they're kind of at a settled amount of money right now. So they're doing pretty well. And they are slowly increasing their facilities as well. It was all 12 last time. It's now 13 and 14 for training and youth facilities. So they are starting to build that. So they're looking for long-term future. League 2 by this stage should be filled with teams from a National League, and Scunthorpe and Torquay are in there, Maidstone are in there, Birmingham have dropped all the way down to League 2, not so good for them, Barnet are in there as well, you've got other non-league clubs, Notts County up there, still struggling in League 2. Have they ever got themselves promoted out of League 2? They've actually went back down again a couple of times, and then they've got themselves back in League 2. Aldershot just about avoiding relegation down there as well. Orient and Doncaster go down into the National League, which must be filled with teams from League 2 now, pretty much. Teams like Mansfield, Gillingham, Rochdale, Northampton dropping all the way down there as well. York, interestingly, have come back down and have stayed in the National League. Woking and Gateshead promoted this time around. Walsall, Stevenage getting relegated down to the National League North and South. That's really poor for them. But my word, some of these teams are spending an absolute bomb on their salaries. More than the teams we saw in League One. I mean, Woking and York at the £17 million mark. Yeovil and Bromley at the £14 million mark. That's mental. How much money are Woking paying on their top earners? £66,000 in the National League for this guy. He can run fast. That's it, really. And they're spending some big money. That was £350,000 they spent on him as well. That's not cheap. But it's nowhere near the biggest transfer fee paid. Someone's just paid £6 million for a guy from Birmingham. This guy, Woking, they spent £6 million. That's for a guy who made 6 appearances. And a 6.47 average rating. That's ridiculous. Okay, we're going to jump to 2050, just over halfway through this experiment, and looking at the Premier League, no National League teams are there. I mean, if you're a Burnley fan, you're happy. If you're a Sunderland fan, you're happy. But if you're a fan of a National League club, you're not happy. Wrexham could get themselves promoted, though. They're in the playoff final. So we'll see next time round if they did get promoted, because it's already been simulated already. So I'm not going to try and jinx things now by trying to get the correct answer. But they have got themselves into the playoff place. Have they ever been in the Premier League looking at this? They've had one season in the Premier League in 2038-39. And they've sort of yo-yoed up and down quite a lot since then, even dropping back into League One temporarily. Promoted straight into 3rd place, just missing out on automatic promotion. But now they've got another chance. I reckon Wrexham could do it. I mean, they've reached the £100,000 mark for some of their players. Mark Casey's a striker who, I mean, he's not bad, but he's not worth £100,000 per week, that's for sure. But Oldham also in the playoffs, they must have lost in the playoffs, probably to Middlesbrough or Wrexham. Scunthorpe have got themselves into the Championship. Who else are in there? Aldershot and Chesterfield in the Championship. Yeovil all the way up there as well, although they're being relegated. So we're getting more and more teams in the Championship now. Surely it's a matter of time until a few of them break into the Premier League and actually stay there. Again, because I'm interested, I want to see the salaries. And actually Wrexham's is 50 million, but it's not the biggest in the Championship anymore. Oldham spend more than them. Fulham spend the most though. Scunthorpe up there with 36 million. Southend will be joining them next season though as they win the playoffs in League One. They'll be joined by Notts County and Maidenhead just missing out on promotion as well, as you can see. Altrincham in League One, Dagenham and Redbridge, Torquay, Solihull Moors, Hartlepool, although they're not their National League anymore, are they? But they feel like they should be. Barnet, Boreham Wood, Woking getting relegated sadly. Where are Southend? Are they promoted there? I want to see their facilities because we've been keeping tabs on their facilities, haven't we? And actually, they've not improved them any more since last time out. And if anything, the facilities have dropped down a little bit. Junior coaching, youth recruitment might have improved, but they've not put any more money into their facilities. And they have, oh my word, they spent a lot in the past 15 years or so. They're down to 145 million. So it's getting a little bit tight. Like, time is running out for these teams to get to the Premier League and then start reaping that massive TV money. That's what's going to make them sustainable. At the moment, I think we're now seeing the likelihood that a lot of these teams are going to be in some big financial fair play issues very soon. It's likely to be the teams that are still stuck in the National League. So who's down near the bottom that would have got the money originally? Not many of them. I think virtually every single club's out of it now. Gateshead is one of them. So let's have a look at Gateshead's finances. 191 million left. So that's still quite a lot of money, but they are, running out of time to get out of a National League, let alone up to the Premier League. Although that should be enough money to get them there, really. Bromley being another one of those teams as well. They've got £209 million left. So maybe they're not quite on the cusp of being destroyed right now, but they're not far off, I don't think. So here we are, 50 years in the future, at the very end of this experiment. Have any clubs made it to the Premier League at this stage? Having a look. Yes, Wrexham are there in 16th place. They've got themselves into the Premier League, but they're the only club. And that feels a bit disappointing, actually. £1 billion we gave all these clubs, and they've not been able to get themselves to the Premier League with that sort of money. That's ridiculous. I mean, Blackburn and Burnley have done very well for themselves. Sunderland have stayed in the Premier League, and Middlesbrough have got Europa League football as well. But Wrexham, they're the ones in the Premier League. And if we have a look at their history, they are a yo-yo team of significant proportion. The past 20 years, they've been up and down. They've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 6 promotions, and I assume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 relegations in that time as well. So these guys are the definition of a yo-yo club, really. How are they doing financially, though? They've got £55 million left. So they've spent virtually all of their money, but it's been worth it for them because they're now in the Premier League, and you could argue an established Premier League team, maybe more of a yo-yo club to be fair, but they stay in the Premier League for a few seasons, then get relegated, promoted again. They're probably too good for the Championship, but not quite good enough for the Premier League. Kind of like Norwich in real life. They have got top-notch facilities, though. They've really invested heavily in the facilities, and of course the stadium as well, the Afron Griffith Stadium with 35,000 seats in it. Sadly, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are no longer in charge of the club. This bloke called Sean Hunter is. What a shame. In terms of wage expenditure, they are nowhere near the top. Tottenham right up there with £224 million. Wrexham down in 15th with £84.5 million. So is anyone going to join them? Chesterfield are about to join them. In season 50, they got themselves promoted to the Premier League. So I think we can count that as a success for Chesterfield. They have been in the Premier League a couple of times, as you can see, getting as high as 12th place one season. Congratulations to them. So they have done it before. They're back there once again. Well done to Chesterfield. Oldham just missing out on the playoffs. Yeovil still in the Championship. Notts County had a wild ride, by the way. I feel like we saw them go up to League One, back down to the National League, and now up to the Championship. They've had some top half finishes. but sadly for them, aren't going to be promoted to the Premier League this time around. But Notts County have had a really tumultuous experiment, I must say. If you're a Notts County fan, if this happens, the next 50 years are going to be mental for you. Scunthorpe are up there, Altrincham up there, Barnet have been relegated, and Everton have done terribly in this experiment. They're down in 21st place in the Championship. And actually, Chesterfield, only with the 5th biggest salary in the Championship as well. Southampton, Watford, Brentford and Newcastle with bigger ones. Newcastle dropped down to the Championship, but I didn't spot that before. That's mental. Although they are owned now by South African owners, not by the Saudi investment bank or whatever it is. So, interesting. In League One, you've got teams like Wealdstone winning the title, Torquay missing out on the playoffs, as have Maidenhead and Maidstone, Southend up there, Eastleigh up there, York up there, Dorking up there, Dagenham and Redbridge, Bromley. So quite a few teams have got themselves up there into League One as well. I don't think we're going to see any more teams in the National League that started off in the National League at least, as even teams like Hereford and Dulwich Hamlet have got themselves into League Two, and we didn't give them any money whatsoever. Grimsby getting relegated, you love to see it. Woking, not so much. We did give them the money. They've obviously got relegated. How much money have they got left, interestingly? They've got 1.6 million left, Woking. They've spent £1 billion. Have they got loads of debt and loans? No debt or anything like that. But they've spent it all. They've ruined it all. I told you, some clubs would do really well investing in facilities. Other clubs would just spend it all and not have any success. And Woking is one of those teams. But poor old Gateshead and Boreham Wood, 50 years in the future, they are still down in the National League. Boreham Wood have escaped, but Gateshead are still trapped down there. Bless them. Interesting to see teams like Blackpool and Reading down in the National League, though. They've had a really big fall. Gateshead, come on, how much money have you guys got left? 1.6 million again. So again, they spent £1 billion on what? Absolutely nothing. I don't understand how they've got to that. And if we look at their squad, they're back down to nothing wagered as well. Gateshead, give them £1 billion and they will do nothing. But during the heyday for Gateshead, they did spend £1.5 million on a player from Preston in 2030. And then it all went downhill from there. They've barely scratched £20,000 in the past 5 years. So obviously money isn't always the best way to get better in Football Manager. Sometimes you need to improve as a manager. And here's a video giving you 5 tips on how to get better.